Dan il-podcast joffri spazju fejn il-mistiedna jesprimu l-ħsieb personali b'mod liberu u responsabbli fuq suġġetti varji, mhux neċessarjament ikun hemm qbil mal-opinjonijiet tal-mistednin. Għalhekk nistiednu lill-udjenza sabiex tevalwa l-argument miġjub u bl-ebda mod ma jsir attakk personali fil-kummenti. Hija l-intenzjoni tal-produtturi li dan il-podcast ikun spazju fejn il-libertà tal-espressjoni tiġi dejjem imħarsa b'responsabbiltà u b'rispett sħiħ.
Perhaps we need some outside universal threat to make us recognize this common bound. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
Hi Nick, today we have Nick Cook with us. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks, Annalise. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. And this is Sayan. He mentions you very, very frequently on his podcast.
Thank you, Sayan. I'm deeply grateful. I'm looking forward to this conversation with you both.
Us too.
The scope was to introduce your work more to the Maltese audience, because the subject here is still a little bit of a taboo.
It's still very new. And not many people are well informed, but the interest is growing, so it's
we gained about 30,000 followers on Facebook, and we have a little bit of viewership on YouTube also, but it's slowly moving.
Well, congratulations!
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I mean, Malta is a very interesting island. I mean, culturally, you have. You know, there are, not that I know a great deal about this, but it's such an interesting place as a sort of nexus of ancient civilization in the Mediterranean.
Yes.
And I think there are many mysteries connected with Malta that I would love to explore one day, but it's outside my professional capacity. But just for my interest, I think you live in on an extremely interesting island.
It's very rich in history, and there are so many things that you can explore on. You were telling us you would like to visit one day, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I would, very much.
Great.
It would be cool. We'll take you around the island.
Yes.
Fantastic. I look forward to it.
We have some questions prepared. I can start.
Yeah.
So basically, you started out at Jane's Defence Weekly, right in the middle of military and aerospace reporting. What first made you think that there might be something more going on behind the scenes?
Well, I joined Jane's Defence Weekly, which was the world's leading defence magazine for specialist readerships, you know, like the intelligence community, like the defence industry, like defence ministries all over the world. So I found myself in a very rarefied culture, if you like. This was a very sort of specialized culture. But I knew immediately that I was there, that the power of this magazine, which had a very good reputation in the fields it reported on, could open doors for me. And to begin with, I wasn't thinking about any deep secrets per se. I mean, just the day-to-day responsibilities of reporting for the magazine took me into many interesting areas about defense, about business, finance, procurement. But gradually, bit by bit, I became more and more interested in the secret stuff, because secret stuff, by its very nature, is something that authorities don't want you to know about.
That's right.
But to a reporter like me, like I was, this, of course, is like the, it's the Holy Grail. You want to chase the thing that is secret. So I was young. I was in my late 20s, early 30s, and this was a fantastic environment in which to go around pursuing and investigating really interesting stories about secret defense programs. And at that time, there were many they weren't even emerging. There were many closed secret defense programs that were happening in the United States. This was an era in which stealth technology was starting to become a thing. There were other technologies associated with exotic weapons. So I found myself pursuing these stories more and more because they were of interest. But bit by bit, as well, I started to think about even more secret technologies that might have been suppressed,
Right.
and which might not be seeing the light of day at all. And one of those was about, in my world, what was called breakthrough propulsion, which would mean some form of new engine, some form of new propulsion or energy system that would give the United States a breakthrough that would supersede all other developments. And I thought that that would have to come in the sort of gravity field, in the anti-gravity field, which is really what my book, The Hunt for Zero Point, was about. It was asking this question: had the United States achieved a breakthrough in propulsion that would, and energy, that would lead to an anti-gravity technology that would look like a UFO to someone who did not know about the breakthrough.
And at
Exactly.
that time,
So I was sort of trying to pursue, I wasn't interested in the UFO question per
that's
se, but I was interested to see whether something that humans could have developed might actually look like UFOs.
Yeah, exactly.
and that's what I going to ask you, because I think we weren't thinking like it was alien or out of this world. Maybe it was something that us humans.
Of course, it could be something that it's
But
coming
at the time-
from our planet, from here.
Yeah, that was very much the way I was looking at it, that this was a technology that came from this planet, that was developed by human beings, and the clues were, there were a series of clues which led me to think, or at least suppose, that this breakthrough had come really quite a long time ago. As those who have read The Hunt for Zero Point will know, Cyan, you will know, I came across, or rather an article was put on my desk at Jane's Defense Weekly, which came from a magazine from the 1950s. And this magazine asked, it stated very boldly on its headline, "The G engines are coming. The gravity engines are coming." And to begin with, I thought this story was rubbish. I looked at it and I thought, this can't be true. Some crazy person has come up with this story, and I very nearly threw it into the trash bin. But something about it caught my eye, and that was this article was naming a lot of companies that were quite well known. They had quite well known names in the defense and aerospace fields, like Bell and Martin and Convair. And it was quoting figures, people saying in those companies saying, we are very close to achieving an anti-gravity breakthrough. And I thought, well, if they're saying that, then why haven't I ever heard of this? I mean, I'm a specialist in this field. And maybe I should be taking a look at it. And that led me to slowly begin to sort of start investigating it, quite reluctantly at first. But it was when I approached a source of mine in Lockheed, or a contact of mine in Lockheed Martin, for an interview with one of the people quoted in the magazine article. And this contact of mine turned around and said, he doesn't want to speak to you, not now or ever. I thought, Okay, well, I wasn't sure there was a story before, but now I'm quite sure that there might be something that is worth investigating.
It was Nathan Twining, yeah?
No, it wasn't. It
sorry.
was actually somebody called George S. Trimble
Sorry.
of the Martin company, which it went on to become Lockheed Martin.
Yes, when they merged into one company, yeah.
Yeah.
And how do you think that it would think so far ahead in the 50s? Because I know they were thinking about imagine the Jetson, the Jetson cartoon. Yeah. So like cars that flies.
Yes,
what was called the Avrocar, I think. So
well, yeah. I mean, that was the question I asked myself. I said, well, look, if there had been a breakthrough in the 1950s, where's the evidence now? I mean, to your point, we should all be flying around in cars and, that look like the Jetson family cartoon.
We do think sometimes.
But we're not. My car stays very firmly on the ground. At least I hope it does.
But in such a short time, we moved far in aviation and automotive technology. So I think along the way, we might achieve anti-gravity.
Well, there were some very intriguing clues to suggest that might have been possible. When I started to look into it, there was evidence of scientists really examining the gravity question. I mean, gravity is a very mysterious force. It is the most mysterious force in the universe. No one quite understands how it is caused. We know what its effects are, but we don't know what causes it. And the Newtonian idea of gravity is not the whole story. So scientists, it was clear in the 1950s, were looking very long and hard at the gravity question and seeing if they could find physics that would help in the understanding of gravity and therefore in understanding it to be able to counter it. That was sort of my starting point. But as I got into the investigation more and more, I discovered that there were efforts, at the time I was investigating this, which was in the mid-1990s, that organizations like NASA were looking at, for example, which suggested that the idea that you could negate gravity was not impossible because NASA was demonstrating some very small effects, anti-gravitational effects, in the laboratory, which suggested that this was not a heresy. This could have happened, but of course on a much bigger scale. So my view was the reason we're not flying around in cars like the Jetsons is because this whole thing might have led to a breakthrough in the 1950s and then been suppressed, completely taken away from public view. And that then led me to look even deeper into the whole question of whether this had been covered up in secret.
Do you think in the 50s had any idea on the technology, how they could counter it? Counter the gravity?
I think they had some ideas. I'm not sure whether they achieved a breakthrough. Yeah, as I talk about in the book, their ideas that it was possible came from what they were seeing in the environment. I talk a lot about sightings of something called Foo Fighters during the Second World War, which were very small balls of light or sometimes spherical metal objects that would interfere with and intercept Allied bombers over Germany. And this was a real phenomenon. They were documented very carefully by American and British intelligence analysts. You can read about them in the archives. So was this the question I had to ask myself was there a secret German weapon system that had been developed in the Second World War that remarkably had somehow been kept secret for, half a century or 60 or 70 years? And so that was one path of investigation that I took. But there were other clues in the environment that scientists in the 1950s were looking at, effectively the UFO phenomenon, which at least told them that developing an anti-gravity craft was possible because they were seeing it for themselves in the real world. The problem was, of course, was the word that you mentioned, Cyan, which is taboo. This was a very taboo field and subject. You couldn't talk about it openly. I couldn't talk about it openly when I was investigating this in the 1990s, in the 1990s. If I had, I would have lost my job at Jane's Defence Weekly. They would have just thrown me out. So I had to be very careful as I was investigating it. They had to be very careful back in the day that they didn't mention it either because it was so taboo.
How deep do you think does government and defense secrecy go?
Very deep. I mean, at the time, I wasn't sure. Actually, I didn't know, but I always felt it. So when I went, particularly to America, as a reporter, as a journalist, I was, as I said, I was given extraordinary access to the Pentagon, to defense companies. I interviewed heads of the defense industrial complex in places like the Skunk Works is a very famous secret development organization in America. And I talked to, people at the CIA and intelligence analysts and, lots and lots of different organizations. And I always felt that whatever I was being shown there was just this deep and that there was this vast...
The tip of the iceberg.
The tip of the iceberg. And what was below the waterline, metaphorically, was just huge and vast and, quite unknowable in a way. And I think, particularly as in more recent years, in the last decade, as other investigators have been looking at the whole UFO question, that has proven to be correct. The iceberg analogy is a really good one. What we see above the water is this tiny area or volume of the defense industrial complex, and below it is a vast structure which is not only deep but essentially completely opaque and invisible to our understanding, and that is, in my view, alarming and dangerous. But it's dangerous and wrong because it is, by its very nature, anti-democratic.
I agree.
I wanted to ask you something. When the Germans were working on the Glogger, if it was real, do you think the crash of Magenta was also real? Or it was just another conspiracy?
I don't know about Magenta because I've not looked into it. I mean, I know about it. This was the crash of a UFO that was supposedly took place in 1933 in Italy. And it was mentioned by a whistleblower called David Grush, who testified to Congress 2 years ago, was it? Thereabouts. I don't know, Cyan, whether that is true, whether it really happened or not. I mean, I happen to respect the David Grush, I think that he has shown himself to be genuine, at least thus far. And Congress, of course, which has been evaluating his testimony and that of other whistleblowers, is also, or appears to be, of the belief that this is I'm going to say conspiracy. It is a secret that has gone back decades. But I don't know about Magenta itself. You mentioned Die Glocke, which, to those who don't know, featured in my book, The Hunt for Zero Point. It's Die Glocke is German for the bell.
The bell.
So this was a bell-shaped object which the Germans supposedly worked on in 1944 and 1945, which produced an anti-gravitational effect. I wrote about it in the book with some caution.
Yes.
I didn't know whether it was or not. Today, I am more skeptical about whether it was an anti-gravity device. I think that it was probably more likely connected to another very secret German activity during World War II, which was its nuclear weapons program. I think that it looks more like, in fact, that whole site in Poland that I describe looks much more like a secret development center for Nazi nuclear weapons.
Thank you. Mr. Sierra.
Yes. In The Grid, you describe consciousness as a potential battlefield. Do you think we're already seeing signs of this in the real world?
Yes, I do. I wrote The Grid, it came out in 2019, and it was, I should make clear, non-fiction.
Non-fiction, yes.
It was fiction. Yeah, I meant The Grid was fiction, but it was based on a lot of non-fiction research, real research that I'd been doing. And I should explain that what prompted me to write The Grid was something that happened that was quite outside the world of technology investigation that I'd been really quite involved in before. And that was the pivot that took me into consciousness research. And this event, which I've described elsewhere, was in 2014 when I was I was in the room during a time when my mother-in-law, my wife's mother, was dying. She'd had cancer and she had battled it very bravely for a long time. And then right at the end, of course, my family, her family, including me, were all gathered in her room. And my wife, Ali, was holding her hand. And at the precise moment that my mother-in-law died, my wife stood up in the room and told everyone in the room that everything was fine, everything was perfect, everything was good. And I am completely surprised by this. I mean, I'm shocked for a start because of what has happened to her mother. But I couldn't understand what Ali, my wife, was talking about. This was totally uncharacteristic. I thought she must have been traumatized in some sense and had said this crazy thing that everything was okay, when it wasn't okay at all. Her mother had just died. But when I spoke to her about it afterwards, she told me she'd been in this place that was infinite and timeless. It felt super connected. She knew everything that there was possibly to know in the entire universe, but she couldn't bring it back with her when she came back into the real world. I mean, in the room, this happened in a second. To me, it happened in a second. For her, it was an eternity. And so when I thought about this, I'd never experienced or known anything like it, except in the testimony of people who'd had near-death experiences. But this was different because Ali, my wife, wasn't having a near-death experience. It was her mother who had died. So how had she tapped into this thing? So I started looking into it, and I quickly found that it's a phenomenon. It's a thing called a shared death experience, where a living person can somehow share in the, as it says, the death experience of somebody else. I found this so extraordinary and mind-confronting that I had to go off and investigate consciousness, which I'd never really given much thought to until that time. And the research that went into that was, I didn't have enough, nor was I qualified to write a non-fiction book about it, like The Hunt for Zero Point, which was non-fiction. The only way I could express this research that I'd done was in a work of fiction, which is what The Grid was. Yeah. But it needed to be rooted in all the very real research that I'd done. So if you read The Grid, you will see that the universe that I create, the landscape, the vision that I build for it, is a very real landscape built on very real research. But the plot itself is fiction.
I also have made some studies about near-death experience, because I interviewed about 8 people that had a near-death experience. But I also explored out-of-body experience and astral projections. And it looks like there is a correlation between those two. When I started to research them, it almost looks like it's the same experience. So
yeah, very much so. I mean, I've just returned from a 3-day conference on Ibiza about psychedelics and psychedelic explorations, in which the experience of psychonauts, as they're called, who take psychedelic drugs like LSD and DMT, are exposed to many of the same experiences as near-death experiences. And in some senses, too, UFO contactees and encounter experiences. So there is some very curious overlap.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, in fact, if you see them as connected in some way.
I do. It's very early stage research for me at the moment. There's still a lot left to explore, but I do see some very intriguing connections between these anomalous experiences of consciousness, like near-death experience, like shared death experience, like out-of-body experience, like psychedelics, journeying, and even some UFO encounters. They're all, in some sense, connected, which is really, really intriguing. I think that we are entering a new phase of exploration of reality itself. And you asked, Annalise, whether some of the wilder speculation that I make in The Grid, in a fiction sense, which discusses the idea that reality warfare could be a thing of the future. Yeah, to some extent I do. I don't like to dwell on it, because actually that's rather a sort of dark direction for this and other conversations to take. What I will point people to is a really interesting paper that was written by, was commissioned by the CIA in 1983, called The Gateway Experience, or the paper on the Gateway experience, which was an analysis, it's about a 25-page analysis of something called the Gateway Experience that was taught or you could go and experience at a place called the Monroe Institute in Virginia. And a lot of, we're getting into another subject here, remote viewers. So we could maybe talk about this in a moment, but a lot of remote viewers who were psychic spies trained by the US Army for psychically spying on enemies like Russia. A lot of them were sent to the Monroe Institute for training. But in that 1983 Gateway paper, it talks about, out-of-body experience. It talks about astral journeying. And so all of these things are beginning to come together as something that can be looked at as one phenomenon. And they all fall under the consciousness umbrella and lead us into an exploration of the nature of reality, which is very necessary, in my opinion, because I think everything that we have taught, or a lot of the stuff that we have been taught about, the reality, the physical reality that we inhabit, is not correct, or at least it was correct up to now. Now we need a new understanding of what this overall reality is that we inhabit.
I started the podcast after my third experience with a UFO. I wasn't going to, I didn't want to be famous or something, it just was a pure curiosity that...
Same as me. We're all driven by curiosity in the end.
That's true.
And there is something, I think, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but there is something about the phenomenon, if you encounter it, that instills in you a sense of curiosity.
Yes.
And it makes you go on and question things that you would never normally question, like the nature of reality. So we share something in common. I'm not an experiencer like you, Cyan, but in a sense I am. I witnessed the experience of someone incredibly, couldn't be closer to me, my wife, who I knew wasn't lying. So that was good enough for me to go off and become very curious about all of this myself.
In 2009, it was my second experience. I saw something coming out of the sea, and it felt like something was pushing me down, and it was like, how we say, something, anonymous, how to say it?
Heavy.
Like a heavy feeling, It was like
dragging you down.
Yes,
right?
that's what I felt, and it got me thinking from then. And then, in 2019, I had a guy working with me, and he used to tell me, I saw a UFO there, I saw another UFO there, and I never believed him. And one day he was helping me, and he told me, look, there's a UFO. And it made like 10 minutes, and when I said, the phone, where's the phone? It started to go up, and then it disappeared. I have like 2 to 3 minutes of it, but it was very close. And when I thought about the mobile, to grab the mobile and take a video, it started to go up. That was crazy, because it was still there.
And even the 2009 one that you mentioned, you were with someone else, right? So it wasn't
never
just
alone.
him. There were two people who experienced the same phenomenon.
And now we started doing CE5. Last time we did it, we were around 60 people.
Yeah.
So
well, which of course is intriguing in itself, because to my mind and to the minds of many people right now, but when I started out on this, when I was looking at the UFO phenomenon, I came at it from the perspective of someone who has investigated classified defense programs, which are about solid metallic objects. But the more I got into it, I realized that that is an unrealistic characterization of the phenomenon. In fact, I was attending a speech or a panel discussion in New York in 2017 in which Jacques Vallée, the famous ufologist, was speaking, and he started talking about the phenomenon as being both physical and non-physical, being physical and psychic. And I'm thinking, because I haven't done any research up until, or very little research on UFOs until that point, I'm thinking, well, how can this be? How can something be both physical and non-physical? But of course, as you get deeper and deeper and deeper into this, you realize that, in a sense, we've been asking the wrong question. We're looking at UFOs and thinking, I've got to know the answer to these phenomena, these UFO phenomena. I've got to understand where they come from. But instead, I think we should be asking, what is the foundation of reality that gives rise to this phenomenon, that allows this phenomenon to operate in our perceptual space, the way we perceive things, in the way that they appear, which is to at one moment be visible, the next moment be invisible, to be hovering there 1 second and the next disappear in the blink of an eye, to be able to go through the air into space and below the sea. We're asking the wrong question. It's not about where these things come from, although that is interesting. It is about the nature of this reality space that allows them to operate in that way in our reality space. So that's where I'm kind of focused now.
Would you also connect paranormal sightings, like, ghost experiences, or when people see people who they believe were dead? Would you also think that there's some connection to this?
Yeah, definitely. I do. And again, my mantra, particularly having been trained this way as a journalist, is follow the data, wherever the data leads. As I said a moment ago, my natural inclination as an aerospace and defense journalist is to follow the UFO because it's in the sky, and this is something that interests me. But instead of just seeing the UFO in the sky, the data tells me that all around the UFO encounter are these other phenomena, like ghosts, poltergeists, Bigfoot, cryptozoological creatures. They all come in the same orbit, the same sphere as the UFO sighting. Well, how can that be? So should I ignore that data, which is what, many people in my position would be inclined to do, and just focus on the UFO craft? Well, no. If you're going to be responsible in following the data, you have to follow it all. And what that tells me, I have reached no firm conclusions, but what it tells me is that somehow they're all connected. And the thing that is connecting them is our very loose understanding of what consciousness is. The neuroscientist will tell you that consciousness takes place inside the brain. But someone with an experiencer, with a more, with a less conventional view of reality, would tell you that consciousness exists everywhere. It is not just in the brain, it is imbued in the very fabric of existence. So, these are in our exploration of a new science paradigm, you can't take any question off the table. You have to explore every single one if you want to derive some meaningful answers about the nature of the universe that we live in.
Do you think others are more, are more prone to experience
that there are
than
some
others?
people who are more prone than
Because
others?
I made a little, everyone that I interview, I make like a questionnaire. I ask them what was their blood type, what type of experience they had, and out of like 1,000 something experiencers, 211 had they knew their blood types. The others they didn't know, and which is crazy. And then I found a correlation where the O bloods were more prone to experience, and the others were just had one experience, but the O's had more experience, like UFOs, poltergeist, out of body experience, and like perceiving things in the future. A lot of experiences, precognition.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, I do think some people are more prone to experiences than others. I'm sure you're aware, Cyan, about Dr. Gary Nolan and Dr.
Yes.
Kit Green's research, which has pointed them to the same belief that some people are more predisposed through their genetic makeup to certain kinds of experiences. But your data is very interesting.
Yeah, because
I'd be interested in seeing that.
Malta is a good test subject because a lot of Maltese were immigrants in the past.
And there are so many people who have experienced.
Yes, we have a lot. People contact us every day about somebody saw a UFO, somebody had an experience with a shadow being. I got 3 abductions now, which is crazy. And one of them we have also photos of the markings.
Yes, markings on the back.
On the back.
Yes.
Yes.
That was very interesting.
I mean, we were talking at the very beginning of this about what a fascinating place Malta is, and for the very reasons you've just said, it is my understanding of it is this melting pot of different migrations over the millennia to the island, which makes, as you say, its genetic makeup very interesting and diverse, and that might offer some profound clues to the hereditary nature of contact experience. Yeah.
Well, we had one lady here, Josa Mifsud, and she would say she was in contact with the lady.
This happened way back
from the 80s
in
to 1997. And she would congregate people, and they would see the sun dancing. If the sun danced, we had big problems. So they would see something.
There were a mass of people who would join her, who would meet in this particular place in Malta called Girgenti.
Yes, and at first I thought there was a craft because she had a close encounter, and the craft maybe left a radioactive impact. But then I requested a study through a minister in Malta, and never came out. But about a year ago, a study came out, and the Girgenti, the place where this took place, is one of the highest radioactive places in Malta.
Yes, they found the radioactivity rate was higher.
There are 3 places here: Girgenti, Birzabuja, and El Ammih. There are highly radioactive, and we have a lot of experiences in those places.
In those 3 places?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
That's really interesting. There is Skinwalker Ranch, which people will have heard about because of the TV program, is a really interesting place. I mean, what they're doing with the TV program is interesting enough, but actually its ownership under this billionaire Robert Bigelow, that's particularly interesting time for me, because that's when it was studied by a team of scientists that Mr. Bigelow put in place, who and of course those scientists, a lot of those scientists were attached to the military or came from a military background, so they put it under a very rigorous spotlight. But one of the scientists told me that Skinwalker had been subjected to quite a lot of fallout, so radioactive fallout, that had fallen on the ranch, amongst other places in Utah, from nuclear weapons experiments or blasts that had taken place in the neighboring state of Nevada. So you do get a correlation sometimes between radioactivity in the land, on the land, and sightings phenomena. I don't know why, but it's possible that, and sightings of the lady interest me a great deal, because symbolism I find very interesting in this whole phenomenon. And the lady is, of course, a figure who recurs again and again and again in the phenomena. Sometimes she's associated with Hathor from ancient Egypt. Other times with the Madonna. Yes. We've had sightings like in Fatima in Portugal, and of course it's very associated with the experience of Chris Bledsoe.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if the lady is a symbolic representation of some kind, what is she trying to say to us? Maybe this is just a representational communication from, I don't know what, some deeper informational substrate that is trying to communicate something to us. And one thing I'm very intrigued about at the moment is the idea that there is actually a deep intelligence built into the fabric of the universe itself. And certain things might trigger this intelligence to manifest in a certain way in the physical world. And maybe the lady is one of those manifestations, a communications, a symbolic communication between that deeper informational substrate of the universe, which I think we can start to view now as a system, or a gigantic system that is trying to express something to us. And maybe that that communication is that we are doing damage to the planet, and in places where damage has been caused, in other words, where there is either caused radiation through nuclear experiments, or maybe even just natural radiation, which is, I'm sure, what it is on Malta, that these are sort of somehow triggering the phenomenon to manifest and appear in these places. I don't know, but it's an interesting idea.
Juza wrote to President Bush and Gorbachev at the time, and they came and met in Malta.
Yes.
I don't know.
Who did?
Juza Mifsud. This lady
who was leading these congregations.
She sent letters to Bush and Gorbachev, and they met here in Malta.
Yeah.
Who met there in Malta?
The two presidents.
George W. Bush.
They did?
And
Yes.
Gorbachev.
Really?
Yes, after she sent the letters, they came in Malta.
When was this?
Meta came here? I think 92, I think.
Okay.
We'll look up the exact year.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see.
Which is crazy also.
That is crazy.
Because the lady always advocates for peace.
For peace. Yes, that was the message.
2nd and 3rd December 1989.
2nd and 3rd December 1989.
1989. Right, 2nd, 3rd. Wow. Okay, that's really interesting. That's fascinating.
I know that I saw your interview with Dan Zitterstorm, and you talked about the Exo Institute.
Yeah. Yes. So 2 months ago, a little over 2 months ago, colleagues and I launched the Exo Institute, which is its intention is to introduce the idea of this emerging science that we've been talking about a bit here, the emerging science of consciousness and reality, to audiences, to sectors that wouldn't necessarily know about it. So we all the founders and I all come from a very sort of physical world environment. I'm a former defense and aerospace journalist, very imbued in real world technology. And my other founders are entrepreneurs or academics or have an academic background. So we are keen to communicate this emerging science of consciousness and reality in a way that is clear and comprehensible to people who have never had any exposure to it before, or who would just think it was crazy woo-woo stuff. The reason being, it doesn't take me to tell you or your audience that the world is in trouble. There are many problems ranging from climate issues through conflict, disease, runaway technology like artificial intelligence, to know that we're facing an existential crisis. And all the old thinking that produced this world that we live in, predominantly 20th century technology and 20th century thinking, is not working in solving the problems that we have. So we need new thinking. And there is new thinking embedded in this emerging science. So instead of just waiting for it to appear, giving it time, we're saying we can't afford to wait for this new thinking to emerge. We have to solve these problems now. And therefore, let's bring this new science through in a responsible way, because on the back of it, there's going to be both a scientific and a technological revolution. In much the same way that the Copernican revolution came from Nicholas Copernicus's, then radical views of the universe 400 years ago, and that led to Newton, and Newton led to the Industrial Revolution and to Einstein, etc., etc. But we can't wait hundreds of years for this revolution, this new revolution to come. We have to bring it into existence now. So that's very much what the Institute is convened to do.
I would like to thank you very much for.
Yes, definitely, thank
it
you.
It
was our honor and pleasure to
Yes.
discuss these things. These are fascinating and intriguing things to be talking about, and also our viewers. We're really keen on growing this understanding and encouraging people to ask questions and ask the right questions also.
That's so important. It's about asking questions and asking, as we say at the Exo Institute, asking better questions. That's all really, in the end, we can do. But any one of us can do that. You don't have to be a scientist. You don't have to be an engineer. Any one of us can just ask better questions. And I think that's a fantastic message for you and us to communicate to your audience.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time. And we hope to see you in Malta.
I hope so too. Thank you.
We can stay in contact. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Nick.
Have a nice day.
You too.
Thank you.